It's definitely a trend to attempt to milk any kind of legitimate Team Fortress 2 information within this community. So let's get through this as quickly as we possibly can. On June 22nd, 2021, Valve pushed the first major Team Fortress 2 update to the game in the longest gap of time we have yet seen. This update predominantly ships a summer crate of cosmetics made by the community and attempts to combat bad actors through already known exploits. These bad actors are mostly those in charge of the botting rings that have plagued Team Fortress 2 Casual for over a year now. This situation, unfortunately, has not been alleviated. Really, all that's happened at this point is taking some of the tools away from these bot makers and make them a little weaker, but they're still going to be running rampant until some major steps are taken. And fortunately for anybody that cares about Team Fortress 2, those steps have started to be taken. But the patch notes themselves have a very generic, quote, numerous security and stability improvements. Data mining this update results in the find of telemetry-related strings, resulting some in the community, including myself, to speculate that CSGO's trust factor, a system that Valve has shown legitimate interest in moving towards other projects, possibly coming to Team Fortress 2, a system that is perfect for the situation at hand. Trust factor, for those unaware, is effectively a social credit score for the game that it is in place. It takes a look at all of the related activity that you do on Valve's Steam platform and calculates if you are more than likely to cheat and puts you with other people with a similar score. The big secret is that CSGO's trust factor was actually implemented earlier than it was announced. That first iteration, the initial rollout, was just there to collect the data and start testing. The speculation was that these numerous security and stability improvements were that initial rollout, and in 6 to 12 months we would be hearing about it. John McDonald, one of the lead designers of this system, explained generally how the rollout worked at a GDC talk back in 2018.
We have a bunch of data that shows that Trust works really well, but I kind of prefer the anecdotal version instead, and that's that we actually launched Trust about 6 months before we announced it. And during that time we were gathering feedback and looking for people that sort of like had bugs, like just general feedback, right? They didn't know that we were running the experiment. And so what would happen is you'd see a thread pop up on like the Steam community forums where somebody would say, CSGO is filled with cheaters. And then you'd see somebody else reply, and usually quite a few someone else's who would reply and say, I don't really ever run into cheaters anymore. I don't know what you're talking about. And at this point, we had sort of been public about some of the other anti-cheat work that we had doing, and so the player base assumed that that was why they weren't seeing cheaters as often. But we would go and basically say like, hey, let's go figure out what this person's trust score is. And we'd go and we'd look at the OP, and you'd be like, this dude is tied to 50 accounts, and 49 of them have bans for cheating. I don't care that that guy runs into cheaters. He should run into cheaters because he's definitely going to cheat again, but maybe he hasn't done it yet.
But it's not that. The telemetry-related strings found within the data mine have more to do with a Day Zero exploit that was reported on HackerOne a few months ago, found within Counter-Strike Global Offensive, allowing a bad actor to access far more of a player's user data than originally intended, using in-game invites and launch commands. This exploit was fixed in Counter-Strike Global Offensive a few months ago in the exact same way that we are currently seeing these telemetry-related strings in Team Fortress 2. So, those security fixes and stability improvements have nothing to do with trust factor. Yet. I've been discussing this with a few people that know what the hell they're talking about, the predominant of which is Mastercoms, the creator of Team Fortress 2 and the Mastercom Fig, even though, on the face of it, these strings have nothing to do with trust factor as they're not actually pinging back Valve servers to collect the data. There is a possibility that this next rollout of trust factor, or some iteration of a trust system, is going to be rolled out entirely on the server side, or at least initially on the server side, to keep bad actors from learning how the system works. Trust factor broke a couple of months ago after Valve reportedly did major maintenance and updates to the system. They didn't report this update, and CSGO appeared to have significantly more cheaters out of nowhere because that grouping of certain types of players ceased to exist for a short period of time. John McDonald reported this fact far later, after the problem was fixed, causing a lot of people to feel as if that communication is just as important as the execution of specific goals. They updated the Trust Factor service and they continue to do maintenance on it in order to be able to keep the system out of the hands of the bad actors, because once you learn exactly how the system works, you have a much better chance of defeating it. So the experts that I have been consulting suggest, through speculation based on a few of the activities at Valve Software over the last few months, that Trust Factor, a system that Team Fortress 2 desperately needs in order to return to some semblance of decent gameplay on casual, may be rolling out in secret only on Valve's end to kind of 1-2 punch the bad actors. Regardless of if Trust Factor, VACnet, Trust in general, or the Overwatch system that CSGO has held for years may be in TF2's future, there are conversations happening in deep corners of the community related to security and exploits by people that have the power to make this work. Anyways, those are my thoughts on that Team Fortress 2 patch. I hope it helped. I'm Tyler McVicker, signing off. Adios.